So welcome today. I just want to echo what Eric has stated before, that the data you collect is critical to the work we do at the water boards. California's huge. We run the surface water ambient monitoring program out of our office, which is the Office of Information Management now, $11 million, and we're not able to assess every single water body in California. We just can't. So we rely on the data you collect, the work that you're doing to do our jobs. And one example of that is our new program, the Harmful Algal Bloom Program. We rely on observations made by the public to let us know when you see harmful algal blooms, so we can go out and take action, confirm that it is harmful, go out and help the local watersheds make postings to protect not only our dogs, because unfortunately it's dogs that are the first to swim in the water and eat the algae, but also protect our children and our families through swimming. The mic? Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, sorry. In the back, there's also a workbook. Be sure to pick one up. If you don't get one, let me know and I'll print out some more. But it's a workbook to help you walk through the development of a quality assurance project plan. It's got some more questions in there as well to help walk you through it. And it's also got this really cool page in the back, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Moving forward, so I've been with the water boards for 20 years. I've worked with agricultural coalitions developing quality assurance project plans. I've worked with big agencies, and we think we have DWR here today, but also the SWRCB program, volunteer monitoring groups like yourselves. Pretty much anybody can pick up the phone and give us a call, and we will help you through this process. Many of you have this requirement on you as part of getting a grant from the federal government to do watershed monitoring. I don't know about you, but every time I hear the task that I have to write a QAP, I get this pit in my stomach. It reminds me a lot of having to do taxes using the paper forms, the 1040A. A lot of the terminology we use is confusing. A lot of it's overcomplicated. EPA has made a great step forward with the new citizen guide, but they could take it the next step further and make it even more easy. And this is what I'm trying to teach you today, is there's a secret to all of this. Each of us were born with that innate ability to question our surroundings and test things, even from our children. What happens if I throw mom's phone in the toilet? It's those questions that drive us to go out and monitor our watersheds and really understand what's going on. But a quality assurance project plan really seems like that checkbox that we have to check at the end of the day to make sure we get our funding or meet a requirement. But the secret is it's a tool. It's a tool to, one, help you design your monitoring program. But it also ensures that if you follow this plan, it'll get you the data that you need to answer the questions that you're asking. It also tells others about your project. So if you want others to take a look at your data and use that data in the decisions we make at the water board, this is a way to do that. And so we do read these project plans. They're not something we file away in the bottom of the cabinet. They're very critical to us saying, yes, we can use this data. We're going to include it in this larger set. And honestly, we have this $11 million program that's SWRCB, but we're just as equal going to be using the data that's collected by citizen scientists, because you're reaching the watersheds that we can't go to. Your data is important to us, and it's critical, and you're really the on-the-ground resources that we need. Sometimes I think you guys care about it more than we do. It's good. So the truth about QA plans, they don't need to be 400 pages long. They should be simple. They should be straightforward, get to the point, and they're scalable. So the less complex your project is, the smaller they can be. I've had a quality assurance plan on my desk that's only 2 pages long. It gets to the point, tells me what they're doing, what they did, what data is connected, and what it looks like in CDN, so I can go find it and use it. These things don't need to be a narration of your entire life unless you want to write that down. We're willing to read it. But really, don't let these things be scary. Let them be a tool that you use. Don't do them after the project's done, even though even SWRCB does that sometimes. Use it for yourselves, but also use it to communicate what you're doing to the wider audience. Because in science, as you know, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So quality assurance really ties in well to project management. And EPA takes from project management skill set to help you design your monitoring plans. But really, a project management lifecycle is about planning, documenting, doing, and following it up. And so that's no different for water quality monitoring. For systematic planning, what we're talking about is sitting down and really thinking about what you want to do and where you want to go, but also thinking about your budget and your limitations and coming up with realistic questions. The quality assurance plan itself is a place to document it, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But then we get into implementation. Quality assurance doesn't stop at the plan. It continues throughout the entire project. So not only are you going to go out and monitor, you're also going to do QA on yourselves. Make sure that the people that are collecting samples are following the standard operating procedures, that the lab is doing what you asked them to do, that your data is getting into the system exactly how it came from the laboratory and representing your results, but also taking a look at the big picture. How many data points did we collect? Are we able to answer the question that we need using those data points? And then when you go next year and you think, well, the first year I was only able to collect pH. That was really great, but maybe I need to collect dissolved oxygen as well. So it's an iterative process. It's circular. It never ends. But it should get better every single time you go out. So the number one problem that's systemic from Department of Defense down to citizen science is that data quality objectives is misunderstood. This is not where you say, I want my laboratory control spike to be between X and Y. This is about the question that you're asking and the level of data, the volume of data, the quality of data that you need to answer your question. You have to start by asking yourself numerous questions. And so what this workbook does is it walks you through those questions, gives you tips for thinking about things. It's the start of a guide. But it can be improved, so I'll be looking for your feedback as well. Let me know what we can do to improve this workbook. Number one question, what is the project going to study? I have seen multi-million-dollar projects with a data quality objective that is unreasonable. They want to solve world peace on $1 million budget. It's not going to happen. You really want to think about what you're looking for. Yes, you know there's a water quality problem or there's a trash problem in a creek, but you're not going to solve it. You want to get to that finite level of information that you need to answer one question. Try to stick to 1 to 2, because the bigger the question, the bigger the budget you're going to need. And this process of asking yourself questions is you probably have to cycle back and modify that initial question a few times to get to the point of what you're actually doing. How are the data going to be used? Second most important question. If you are wanting to collect data that you want to tell us about a watershed that's impaired and you want us to put it on the 303D list, I know these are complicated terms, but it's basically a list of watersheds that we know there's a water quality problem. You know about it, we don't know about it yet. You want to produce data for that. There's a set of requirements that goes with collecting data for that purpose. If your purpose is to simply observe a watershed and, like Eric pointed out, educate about what you're seeing in that, you're not going to need those super complicated requirements that come with 303D listing. So, and what data and information are needed? So this, again, ties into that first question. If you're looking at trash, you probably want to observe trash. If you're looking at mercury contamination in watershed, you'll want to look at mercury. But you'll also want to look at pH and EC and things that tie into how mercury interacts with the wildlife in that watershed. Number one question on the workbook underneath this question is what data is already available to you? So the state goes out and they have statewide monitoring programs, but one of the things they have a hard time doing is going out and gathering other people's data to figure out, do I already have a data set to work with, and where are the data gaps that I need to go to? So be sure to ask yourself that. What are other people already doing in this watershed, and make sure I'm not spending money on something that's already been done. 2, do I really need to go out and collect this information? If the answer is yes, great. Then you can move forward to the next question. What are the limits of the study? Like I said, you can't solve world peace with $1,000. It's not going to happen. But what you can do is to say, take your $1,000 and focus on a piece of that watershed. Yeah, I'm going to collect 10 samples in this section of the watershed. Well, what time of year are you going to do it? During the rainy season, during the summer? Again, it goes back to that question you're going to ask. If it's about harmful algal blooms, you probably, for right now, don't need to go out in the middle of January. That's changing. But if you went out in August, yes, you're going to see a harmful algal bloom. You might be able to see how bad it is and whether or not we need to improve our posting guidance. How will the decision be made? So this is a question that people struggle with. Well, what do you mean? I'm just going to go out and I'm going to observe that there's a problem with mercury in this watershed. What's the decision to be made? Is there a problem? Is there not? So this ties into water quality thresholds. So what a water quality threshold is what the water board uses to determine whether or not there's a problem. These thresholds often have layers and layers and layers of research that go into them to say that anything over X milligrams per liter is a problem. Anything below that is not a problem. And usually the water board takes the most conservative approach and says, we want the most protective criteria applied. So you'll want to work with a regional water board to determine what that water quality threshold is. So we have a network of swamp coordinators that work at the regional boards that can help you. So please reach out to the swamp group and say, hey, I've got a question about this watershed, and we'll get you in the right direction to figure out what that threshold is. This question ties into what method you need to use, because a laboratory says, yes, I can test for mercury, and I can do it for $10, but at that $10 threshold, your data is probably going to come in way too high of a reporting level to be useful to you. So you want to tie all of this together to make sure that your sampling design makes sense for you. So last question, how much error is acceptable? Error is not a bad thing. Error is everywhere. We're talking about the uncertainty that goes into taking a sample. So that human element, whether or not they switched the bottle 3 times or put the cap on properly. There's also error in every measurement we take. You can spend a lot of money on a really highly calibrated sonde, which is the probe that you go out and you take your EC and your DO and your chlorophyll A and all these different measurements with. Even that has error in it. It's the plus and the minus. So even if you have 1 milligram of an analyte in your watershed, it's plus or minus something. Sometimes your machine can tell you what that is. That's great, but that's only one set of error on top of a bigger set of error that's going to come with humans, basically. Error is in when you collect the sample, how you collect the sample, what you're collecting. Basically, it's everywhere. I think we've got it, right? So you want to set like measurement goals, objectives on each type of data you're collecting to try and narrow that plus and minus down to something that's reasonable. Why this is important to the water boards gets back to that water quality threshold. If you have 1 milligram per liter of an analyte, you want to make sure you have a method that can detect way below that, plus or minus a certain amount, so we are confident in the data that we collected. We'd say, yes, there is a problem. I can say that with 50% certainty, because again, error is a bigger picture that we're working on here at the water board. Right now, we put data into the database. We have QA flags that go with it, quality assurance flags, that can tell you certain things about the error at the measurement level. It can tell you certain things about the error in the field level, but our next step is to put that all together so you can visually see it as an error bar in a graph. A little harder to do with more objective type measurements like observations, but I think we can get there in the future. And we really want to, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the decisions we make are defensible and that we have confidence in those measurements. So what do we do with all the answers to these 6 questions? At the back of this workbook is a crosswalk that tells you where to put it in your quality assurance project plan. So most people start with the blank template for the quality assurance project plan. They start with page 1, which is the cover sheet, and they move into page 2, which is table of contents, and then they get stuck at the first thing. Been there, done that. Start with the questions first. Answer them in your brain. on a piece of paper, and then start inserting them into the template after you're done walking through this design process. It'll make your life so much easier. It'll get you out of that cycle of not knowing what the terminology means. It's a really quick and efficient way to do it, but it also will keep your quality assurance plan to the point. Because you don't need to spend hours and hours and hours trying to come up with fancy dialogue about your project, when really you're just answering the questions, putting them in a format that somebody can read, and handing it to your field crew, and handing it to the water board when you want us to use your data. So getting back to the last part of the project management lifecycle, once you have everything written in your plan, follow the plan, follow up with your crews, check the laboratories. Jacob's going to talk about how to work with the laboratories. That's an integral part to working with the laboratories, telling them what you want. You can hand them your QAP. They will have to read it if you're paying them, but also follow up with them when the data comes in and say, this isn't what I ordered. Make sure this is right. Make sure the quality meets this. The back and forth, don't pay for it until you get what you want out of them. And data quality assessment, which is often confused with data verification and validation. What this step is really looking at that whole picture. Did I collect enough data points to get the answer that I need? What should I do better next time? What else should I look for? Who else should I collaborate with? It's a very important step. So additional resources, you saw the Citizen Science Handbook. This is fresh, hot off the press. I think it was last month. But provided links for it as well. Here at the Water Board, we often recommend the G5 QAP guidance. This is less painful than the R5, which is the requirements for quality assurance project plans for federally funded projects. G5 gives more information about what they're asking for. It's not great, but it'll get you a little bit farther if you need more information. There's two websites here. One is the EPA QAP development tool. I haven't spent much time on here, but it's targeting those federally funded projects. And the Water Board's QA page, which we're going to try and develop even more and more resources as we come up with them. One thing I want to leave you with today is that this narrowing down of quality assurance project plans to 6 questions is no different than the talk I'm giving today, than the talk that I'm giving to Water Board staff. That it's the same questions regardless of who you are, the scale of your project, who's funding you. It really boils down to those 6 questions. Don't overthink it, answer the questions, get them in there, turn it in, you're done. It's not scary. And a lot of times you'll see a monitoring plan plus a QAP plus a performance evaluation. Talk to your project managers that you're coordinating with at the Water Board and say, you know what, the quality assurance plan has everything I need. Can we work it out? So this is what we can do. We just do it once, not have to have separate documents. So I've been a QA officer for 20 years, like I said. The last thing I want to do is have to read your QAP and a monitoring plan and cross-reference them, because they're one and the same. You can't have one without the other. And the monitoring plan is actually part of the QAP. Yeah, so, any questions?
Folks on the line, we've unmuted the phone. You can ask your questions. And we can take any questions in the room. Just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. If you're online, you can just speak up and ask your question directly right now.
He likes crabs, I know.
Questions?
Hopefully I've made it super easy. You don't have any questions.
She is so efficient.
Yeah, so we'll make the workbook, both the presentation and the workbook, available electronically for you. I do have an extra copy if somebody needs it right now, but if you want more, I'll print some out and put it on the table while you're at lunch. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Question back there.
As regional monitoring programs are becoming more and more popular, Are there plans to develop a template that will be appropriate for a regional monitoring program rather than a singular project because it has multiple monitoring components?
So that's a really good question. So why I called this training quality assurance plans, because they can be scalable. So for swamp, sorry I'm using that example so much, we actually have a program plan that outlines the requirements for every monitoring project that occurs under swamp. Some of our bigger statewide programs have a full quality assurance plan that's updated annually. Our smaller projects actually have the 6 questions that they have to answer, and then tied up with our measurement quality objectives that we've outlined for the program. It really depends on the complexity of your monitoring programs and projects. So there could be a regional monitoring program that has a program plan that outlines the requirements for each project, but at some point it gets unwieldy. So I've seen RMP ones that are about 400 pages long, and there's so much complex elements that sometimes it's more valuable to the program to have a separate quality assurance plan for each component. It's also easier to update. It's easier to hand out to field crews because, like I said, this is a tool. We want you to make it short, sweet, simple, and hand it to your field crews in your labs. That's hard to do when it's 400 pages. But really, we'll leave it up to the program or the project to decide what level of complexity of QAP that they need. Did that answer your question? Awesome, thank you.